Little girl mysteriously appears in a police officer's backyard. One detail makes him call 911 in tears. Before we dive into this heartwarming story of unexpected connections, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Jack Harlan's backyard as he stepped onto his porch, coffee mug in hand. At 52, the retired detective had grown accustomed to quiet mornings in his suburban home. The neighborhood was just waking up, birds chirping, distant sounds of breakfast preparations, the peaceful rhythm of small-town life. But something was different today. A soft whimpering sound drifted from behind his garden shed, barely audible above the morning breeze. Jack paused, his trained instincts immediately alert. Living alone for the past 3 years, he knew every sound his property made. This wasn't normal. Setting his mug on the porch railing, Jack walked carefully toward the back of his yard. Behind the old wooden shed, nestled against a pile of autumn leaves, lay a small figure that made his heart skip a beat. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, curled up like a frightened kitten. Her clothes were worn and too large for her tiny frame. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and she appeared dangerously thin, but she was breathing. "Hey there, sweetheart," Jack whispered, kneeling slowly beside her. Years of police work had taught him how to approach scared children. "You're safe now." The child's eyes fluttered open, beautiful green eyes that seemed far too old for such a young face. She didn't speak, just stared at him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone. 911, this is Jack Harlan at 412 Maple Street. I need an ambulance immediately. I've found a child in my backyard who appears to be in serious condition. While waiting for the paramedics, Jack removed his jacket and gently covered the little girl. She was so small, so fragile. As he looked closer, he noticed a distinctive birthmark on her left cheek, a small, star-shaped mark that seemed oddly familiar. "What's your name, honey?" he asked softly. The child's lips moved, but no sound came out. She was too weak to speak. The ambulance arrived within minutes, followed by police cars that Jack recognized from his years on the force. As the paramedics carefully lifted the child onto a stretcher, something deep in Jack's chest tightened. There was something about that birthmark, something that tugged at memories he couldn't quite grasp. Detective Mike Torres, Jack's former partner, approached with his notebook ready. "Any idea how she got here, Jack?" "None," Jack replied, unable to take his eyes off the departing ambulance. "I found her maybe 20 minutes ago. She couldn't have been there long. I was out here yesterday evening." As the emergency vehicles disappeared down Maple Street, Jack stood alone in his backyard. That star-shaped birthmark burned into his memory. Somewhere in the depths of his mind, a voice whispered that this wasn't just a random case of abandonment. This was something much more personal. And Jack Harlan had no idea that his entire world was about to change forever. St. Mary's Hospital buzzed with its usual afternoon activity as Jack pushed through the main entrance. He'd been restless all morning, unable to shake the image of those green eyes staring up at him from his backyard. Something about finding that little girl felt like more than coincidence. It felt like destiny calling. Dr. Sarah Collins met him at the pediatric ward reception, her kind face showing both professional concern and genuine warmth. At 45, she'd seen countless cases of children in distress, but something about this one had touched her deeply. "She's stable, Jack," Dr. Collins said, leading him down the brightly colored hallway. "Severely malnourished and dehydrated, but responding well to treatment. We're calling her Jane Doe for now. She hasn't spoken since the paramedics brought her in." Jack peered through the window of room 203. The little girl lay sleeping, looking impossibly small in the hospital bed. IV tubes delivered much-needed nutrients to her tiny body, and her breathing was steady and peaceful. "Any sign of family? Missing person reports?" Jack asked, his detective instincts kicking in despite his retirement. "Nothing yet. Child Services has been contacted, and they're running searches through all the databases. It's like she appeared out of nowhere." Dr. Collins paused, studying Jack's concerned expression. "You know, you're welcome to help with this case. Detective Torres mentioned you might be interested." Jack nodded slowly. 3 years of retirement had been peaceful, but this felt different. This felt important. That evening, Jack sat in his study surrounded by old case files and newspaper clippings, searching for any similar incidents in the region. His neighbor, Margaret Wilson, knocked on his door around 8 o'clock, carrying a plate of homemade cookies and her usual dose of neighborhood gossip. "Terrible thing, finding that poor child," Margaret said, settling into Jack's kitchen chair. "Though I have to say, there was something strange happening around here lately." Jack looked up from his files. "Strange how?" "Well, about 2 weeks ago, I saw this woman walking around the neighborhood. Dark hair, maybe in her 20s or 30s. She seemed lost, kept looking at house numbers like she was searching for something specific." Margaret paused dramatically. "And she had this sadness about her, you know? Like she was carrying the weight of the world." "Did you see which direction she went?" "That's the odd part. She kept coming back. I saw her 3 different times over the past few weeks, always looking anxious and troubled. Last time was maybe 4 nights ago." Jack made mental notes, his investigative mind, filing away every detail. After Margaret left, he returned to his study but found himself drawn to an old photo album instead of case files. Page after page of memories from his 25 years on the force, retirement party photos, images of a life well lived but somehow incomplete. As he turned the pages, fragments of memories began surfacing. Faces from the past, brief encounters, moments that had seemed insignificant at the time. There was something nagging at him, a connection he couldn't quite make. Around midnight, Jack's phone rang. It was Dr. Collins calling from the hospital. "Jack, I thought you'd want to know. Our little patient spoke her first words about an hour ago." Jack's pulse quickened. "What did she say?" "She woke up from a dream crying softly. When the night nurse asked what was wrong, she said, 'Mommy went away.'" And then Dr. Collins paused. "This might not mean anything, but she also said something about, 'The man with kind eyes brought me here.'" Jack's hand tightened on the phone. "The man with kind eyes?" "That's what she said. Jack, children her age sometimes mix up reality with dreams, but she seemed very certain about it. She described someone who made her feel safe." After hanging up, Jack walked to his bathroom mirror and stared at his reflection. Kind eyes. People had said that about him before. His ex-wife used to mention it. Colleagues would joke about it. But could a frightened child really have seen that in him during those brief moments in his backyard? He looked closer at his own features, then froze. His eyes, they were an unusual shade of blue-green, almost turquoise, a genetic trait his mother had always said was rare in their family. The same color he'd noticed in the little girl's eyes that morning. Jack's reflection stared back at him as a wild, impossible thought began forming in his mind. Somewhere in the depths of his memory, a young woman's face began to take shape. Someone with dark hair and sad, beautiful eyes. Someone with a star-shaped birthmark on her cheek. And for the first time since finding the child, Jack wondered if this case was about to become much more personal than he'd ever imagined. The next morning brought no answers from the official channels. Rachel Martinez, the assigned social worker, arrived at St. Mary's Hospital with empty hands and a frustrated expression. At 38, Rachel had handled hundreds of cases involving lost or abandoned children, but this one puzzled her completely. "No missing child reports match her description," Rachel informed Jack as they sat in the hospital cafeteria. "No Amber Alerts, no calls from worried families. It's as if she simply didn't exist in any system until yesterday." Jack stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "What about birth records, hospital databases?" "We're working on it, but without a full name or approximate birth date, it's like searching for a needle in a haystack." Rachel paused, studying Jack's concerned expression. "Detective Torres mentioned you're retired but willing to help. We could use fresh eyes on this." Jack nodded. "I'd like to start by talking to neighbors, see if anyone noticed anything unusual." An hour later, Jack found himself walking the tree-lined streets of his neighborhood, knocking on doors and asking questions. Most residents had heard about the discovery but offered little useful information. However, Mrs. Henderson, who lived 2 blocks away, proved more observant than most. "Oh my, yes, I remember seeing someone." The elderly woman adjusted her glasses and leaned forward conspiratorially. "It was very early in the morning, maybe around 4 or 5 a.m. I was up because of my arthritis, you know how it gets, and I happened to look out my kitchen window." Jack pulled out a small notebook. "Can you describe what you saw?" A woman, definitely. Dark hair pulled back, wearing simple clothes, jeans and a light jacket. She was carrying something, or someone, very carefully. At first I thought maybe it was a large bag, but the way she held it, Mrs. Henderson shook her head sadly. It was too gentle, too protective to be just luggage. Which direction was she walking? Toward your street, dear. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, but she kept stopping and looking around, like she was afraid of being seen. Jack felt his pulse quicken. Did you get a good look at her face? Not clearly, but she seemed young, maybe 20s or early 30s. And Jack, Mrs. Henderson reached out and touched his arm gently. She was crying. Even from my window, I could tell she was heartbroken. That afternoon, Jack returned to the hospital with more questions than answers. He found the little girl awake, sitting up in bed and coloring with crayons provided by the nursing staff. She looked stronger already. The IV fluids and proper nutrition were working their magic. "Hello, sweetheart," Jack said softly, settling into the chair beside her bed. "I'm Jack. I'm the one who found you yesterday." The child looked up from her drawing, those remarkable green eyes studying his face with surprising intensity. For a moment, neither spoke. "Are you the man with kind eyes?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's heart clenched. "I hope so, honey. Can you tell me your name?" She considered this carefully, as if weighing whether she could trust him. "Emma," she said finally. "Mommy called me Emma." "That's a beautiful name. Can you tell me about Mommy?" Emma's face clouded over, and she returned to her coloring, rough strokes of brown and gray that seemed to represent a house. "Mommy got very sad. She said she had to go away for a while, but that someone special would take care of me." Jack leaned closer, careful not to alarm her. "Did Mommy say who that special someone was?" Emma nodded solemnly and reached for a blue crayon. She drew two figures standing next to the house, one tall, one small, and carefully colored the tall figure's eyes a bright blue-green. "Mommy said to find the man with eyes like mine," Emma whispered, looking directly at Jack. "She said he would keep me safe until she comes back." The crayon fell from Jack's suddenly numb fingers, eyes like hers, the same unusual blue-green that stared back at him from the mirror every morning. "Emma," he managed to say, his voice hoarse with emotion, "did Mommy ever tell you anything about this man? Did she say his name?" Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. "She said his name started with the same letter as jumping, and she said—" Emma paused, concentrating hard on the memory. "She said he was a policeman who helped people, and that he had a good heart." Jack, a name that started with J, a policeman. And somewhere in the back of his mind, fragments of a memory began to surface more clearly. A small cafe in the neighboring town, a young waitress with dark hair and sad, beautiful eyes, and a brief connection that had felt surprisingly meaningful. A young woman whose name, he suddenly remembered with crystal clarity, had been Clara. And Clara had worn a star-shaped birthmark on her left cheek, exactly like the one adorning Emma's sweet face. Jack stared at the little girl who might, impossibly, be his daughter, and felt his entire world shift beneath his feet. That evening, Jack sat in his home office staring at a shoebox he hadn't opened in years. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the lid, revealing a collection of old receipts, business cards, and small mementos from his past. Somewhere in this box was the answer to the question that had been haunting him since Emma's revelation. He carefully sifted through ticket stubs from movies, restaurant receipts, and finally found what he was looking for. A small, faded receipt from Clara's Corner Cafe, dated exactly 5 years and 9 months ago. The memory came flooding back like a dam breaking. It had been a rainy Thursday evening in November. Jack had just finished a particularly difficult case and decided to drive to the neighboring town of Millbrook to clear his head. The small cafe had been nearly empty, warm, and inviting against the stormy night outside. Clara had been his waitress, a young woman with gentle eyes and an infectious smile that seemed to light up despite obvious sadness beneath the surface. They'd talked for hours after her shift ended, sharing stories about life, dreams, and the challenges they each faced. She'd told him about working 2 jobs to support herself, about wanting to go back to school someday, about feeling lost in the world. And yes, she'd had a distinctive star-shaped birthmark on her left cheek that she'd self-consciously tried to cover with her hair. Jack remembered the connection they'd shared that night, something deeper than casual conversation, a genuine understanding between 2 people who'd both experienced loneliness. When the evening ended, they'd exchanged numbers, but life had intervened. Jack got called away on an emergency case that lasted 3 weeks, and when he finally tried to reach Clara, the cafe said she'd quit suddenly. He'd driven back to Millbrook several times looking for her, but she'd seemed to vanish completely. Eventually, he'd accepted that some connections, however meaningful, weren't meant to last. But now, sitting in his office with Emma's drawing spread before him, Jack realized Clara hadn't vanished. She'd been carrying a secret that had changed her life and created the beautiful little girl currently sleeping in St. Mary's Hospital. The next morning, Jack met Detective Torres at their old haunt, Murphy's Diner, to share his theory. Mike Torres had been Jack's partner for 8 years and knew him well enough to recognize when something was eating at him. "You think this Emma might be your daughter?" Mike asked quietly, stirring sugar into his coffee. "The timeline fits perfectly. The physical resemblance is undeniable. And Mike..." Jack pulled out Emma's drawing from the hospital. "Look at this. She drew a man with my exact eye color before I ever told her who I was." Mike studied the crayon drawing carefully. "It's compelling, Jack, but we need more than coincidence in drawings. What was this Clara's full name?" "I never knew her last name. We just talked for one evening, and she only went by Clara at the cafe." Jack ran his hands through his graying hair. "I've been kicking myself for not trying harder to find her back then." "Don't do that to yourself. You had no way of knowing." Mike closed his notebook and looked directly at his former partner. "But if you're right about this, we need to find Clara Santos. That's the name that came up in our missing person search. The question is, why didn't she ever contact you?" That afternoon, Jack returned to the hospital to spend time with Emma. She was sitting up in bed looking much healthier after 2 days of proper care. Her cheeks had gained some color and her eyes seemed brighter. "Hi, Jack," she said with a genuine smile that made his heart soar. "Look what I made." She held up another drawing, this one showing a woman with long, dark hair standing beside a small house. The woman in the picture had tears drawn on her face, but she was smiling. "Is that Mommy?" Jack asked gently. Emma nodded. "She was sad a lot, but she always smiled for me. She worked really hard at 2 different places, and sometimes she was too tired to play. But she always read me stories before bedtime." "What kind of stories?" "Stories about brave people who helped others, and stories about families that found each other when they thought they were lost forever." Emma looked up at Jack with those remarkable eyes. "Do you think Mommy will come back soon?" Jack's throat tightened with emotion. "I think Mommy loves you very much and wants what's best for you. Sometimes grown-ups have to make very difficult decisions." Emma considered this seriously. "Mrs. Rachel said you might help take care of me while we wait for Mommy. Would you like that?" Jack knelt beside her bed, overwhelmed by the trust in her young voice. "Emma, I would consider it the greatest honor in the world." As he spoke those words, Jack noticed Emma studying his face intently, as if memorizing every detail. Then she reached out her small hand and gently touched the corner of his eye. "Mommy was right," she whispered. "You do have kind eyes, just like she said you would." And in that moment, Jack knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would move heaven and earth to protect this little girl and find the truth about Clara Santos. The only question remaining was, what had happened to Clara, and why had she waited so long to lead Emma to him? Detective Mike Torres arrived at Jack's house the following morning with a manila folder and a determined expression. He'd spent the previous evening diving deep into database searches, and his findings were both encouraging and puzzling. "I found 3 women named Clara Santos in the right age range within a 50-mile radius," Mike announced, spreading photographs across Jack's kitchen table. "But here's where it gets interesting and concerning." Jack studied the photos carefully. The third one made his breath catch. It was definitely the Clara he remembered, though the picture appeared to be from a driver's license taken several years ago. Her hair was longer, and she looked younger, but those eyes and that distinctive birthmark were unmistakable. "That's her," Jack said quietly. "That's definitely Clara." Mike nodded grimly. "Clara Maria Santos, age 27. Last known address was an apartment complex in Millbrook, but she moved out 6 weeks ago. The landlord said she left suddenly, paid up through the month but didn't leave a forwarding address." "Any employment records? Family?" "That's where it gets strange. She worked at 2 places, a local grocery store during the day and a cleaning service at night. Both employers said she was reliable but very private, never talked about family, never mentioned having a child." Jack frowned. She was hiding Emma's existence from her employers? "Looks that way." "And Jack?" Mike paused, his expression growing more serious. "According to her last landlord, Clara was struggling financially, behind on utilities, eating mostly canned food, but she always made sure to pay rent on time. Whatever happened, she was trying her best to provide for Emma." That afternoon, Jack and Mike drove to Millbrook to visit Clara's former apartment. The building was older but well-maintained, located in a quiet neighborhood with a small playground nearby. Mrs. Patterson, the landlord, was a motherly woman in her 60s who clearly cared about her tenants. "Clara was such a sweet girl," Mrs. Patterson said, unlocking the empty apartment. "Quiet, respectful, always said hello when we passed in the hallway. I knew she was struggling financially, but she had too much pride to accept help." The apartment was small but clean, a 1-bedroom with a tiny kitchen and living area. Someone had thoroughly cleaned it before leaving, but a few items remained. Children's drawings taped to the refrigerator and a small teddy bear forgotten behind the radiator. "Did you ever see Clara with a little girl?" Jack asked gently. Mrs. Patterson's expression brightened. "Oh, Emma, such a precious child. Very polite, very quiet. Clara was so protective of her, almost like she was afraid something might happen if people knew too much about their situation." "Afraid of what?" "I'm not sure, but there was a woman who came by sometimes. Older, well-dressed, very intense. She and Clara would have these quiet but heated conversations on the front steps. The woman seemed to think she knew what was best for everyone, if you know what I mean." Mike and Jack exchanged glances. "Can you describe this woman?" "Dark blonde hair, maybe in her 40s, always carried a large purse and spoke in this authoritative voice. She acted like she had some kind of official business, but something about her rubbed me the wrong way." "Did you catch her name?" "Melissa something. She left a business card once, but Clara threw it away immediately after she left." Back at the station, Mike ran searches for anyone named Melissa with connections to social services or child welfare in the region. Meanwhile, Jack sat in his car outside the apartment building, trying to imagine Clara's daily life, working 2 jobs, caring for Emma alone, struggling to make ends meet while keeping their existence secret. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Dr. Collins from the hospital. "Jack, I wanted to update you on Emma's progress. She's doing remarkably well physically, but she's been asking about you constantly. She's also been drawing more pictures, one in particular that I think you should see." 15 minutes later, Jack stood in Emma's hospital room looking at her latest artwork. This drawing was different from the others, more detailed and carefully planned. It showed 3 figures, a woman with dark hair, clearly Clara, a small child, Emma, and a tall figure with blue-green eyes. But this time, the 3 figures were holding hands standing in front of a house with flowers in the yard. "That's our family," Emma explained matter-of-factly. "Mommy said that someday we'd all be together, and we'd have a garden with lots of colors." Jack knelt beside her bed, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "Emma, did Mommy ever mention why she couldn't tell this person about you before?" Emma's face grew serious. "She said she made a mistake a long time ago by not being brave enough to tell the truth, but she was saving up money so we could go find him together and make everything right." "What changed? Why did she have to go away?" Emma's lower lip trembled slightly. "The scary lady kept coming to our house. She said Mommy wasn't taking good enough care of me and that she knew better places for little girls like me. Mommy got really scared and said we had to find you right away, even if we weren't ready yet." Jack's hands clenched into fists. This Melissa, whoever she was, had somehow driven Clara to desperation, forced her to make an impossible choice that separated her from her daughter. And somewhere out there, Clara Santos was probably wondering if she'd made the right decision, not knowing that her little girl was safe and that the man she'd chosen to trust was already falling in love with the daughter he never knew he had. The investigation into Clara's disappearance hit its first major roadblock when Mike Torres discovered that someone had been systematically erasing digital traces of Clara Santos. Her social media accounts had been deactivated, her employment records from the cleaning service had mysteriously vanished, and even her utility bills showed inconsistent payment patterns that suggested someone else might have been managing her affairs. "This isn't random," Mike explained to Jack over lunch at Murphy's Diner. "Someone with access to databases and official channels has been cleaning up Clara's digital footprint. The question is whether Clara did this herself or if someone else is involved." Jack pushed his sandwich around his plate, his appetite gone. "What about the grocery store where she worked? Any leads there?" The manager remembered her, said she was reliable but always seemed nervous about something. Get this, she specifically requested not to be scheduled during school hours, and she always paid for small items in exact change, like she was counting every penny. She was protecting Emma's routine and stretching every dollar, Jack realized. She probably didn't want anyone to know she was a single mother. That afternoon brought an unexpected development. Jack was visiting Emma at the hospital when a woman in a business suit approached the nurse's station. She was approximately 45 years old, with perfectly styled blonde hair and an air of authority that immediately put Jack on edge. "I'm here about the child in room 223, the woman announced to the duty nurse. "I'm Melissa Richardson, and I have information about her family situation." Jack stepped closer, his detective instincts activated. This had to be the woman Mrs. Patterson had described, the one who had been pressuring Clara. "I'm sorry, but visiting hours are restricted for this patient," the nurse replied professionally. "Are you a family member?" "I'm a former social worker and a close family friend," Melissa said smoothly, producing an official-looking ID. "I've been searching for this child since her situation became unstable. I need to speak with whoever's handling her case." Jack introduced himself, deliberately, omitting his potential connection to Emma. "I'm the one who found her. Can you tell us how you know the child?" Melissa's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied Jack's face. "I've been trying to help Clara Santos for months." The woman was clearly overwhelmed and unable to provide proper care for her daughter. "I offered assistance, resources, professional guidance, but Clara was too stubborn and proud to accept help." "What kind of help?" Jack pressed. "Temporary foster care, financial assistance, parenting classes. Emma would have been much better off in a stable environment while Clara got her life together." Melissa's voice carried a tone of righteousness that made Jack's skin crawl. Instead, Clara chose to run, putting that innocent child at risk. Rachel Martinez arrived at that moment, having been called by the nursing staff. As Emma's assigned social worker, she had the authority to control who could visit or provide information about the case. "Ms. Richardson," Rachel said after reviewing Melissa's credentials, "I appreciate your concern, but we have protocols for situations like this. If you have relevant information about the child's background, you'll need to provide it through proper channels." Melissa's composure cracked slightly. "That child has been living in substandard conditions with a mother who couldn't handle the responsibility. I tried to intervene before something terrible happened, but Clara refused all assistance. Now look where we are. The child abandoned and the mother vanished." Jack felt his temper rising, but kept his voice steady. "Did Clara ever explain why she was reluctant to accept your help?" "Some people are too prideful for their own good," Melissa replied coldly. Clara had unrealistic fantasies about reuniting Emma with her biological father, some man she'd met years ago who probably didn't even remember her. I tried to explain that relying on fairy tales instead of practical solutions was irresponsible. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. Melissa had known about him, had known Clara was trying to find him, and had actively discouraged it. "Did Clara ever mention this man's name?" Jack asked carefully. "She was delusional about it, called him her guardian angel, and claimed he would solve all their problems if she could just find him again." Melissa shook her head dismissively. "I told her that kind of thinking was exactly why she couldn't properly care for Emma." Rachel stepped between them, sensing the rising tension. Ms. Richardson, thank you for your information. We'll be in touch if we need additional details. For now, I need to ask you to leave so Emma can rest." As Melissa gathered her things, she looked directly at Jack. "Whoever you are, I hope you understand that child needs stability, not more false hopes and broken promises. Clara Santos was an unfit mother, and Emma deserves better than whatever fantasy her mother filled her head with." After Melissa left, Jack sat in the hallway trying to process what he'd learned. This woman had been systematically undermining Clara's confidence, dismissing her hope of finding Emma's father as a fairy tale, and pressuring her to give up her daughter. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop looking for Clara. Some truths are better left buried. Think about what's best for the child." Jack stared at the message, his detective instincts screaming that Melissa Richardson was far more involved in Clara's disappearance than she had admitted, and if she was willing to send anonymous threats, what else might she be willing to do to keep the truth hidden? Emma appeared in her doorway, having heard the raised voices in the hallway. "Jack? Who is that lady?" She sounded angry. Jack knelt beside her, taking her small hands in his. "Just someone who thinks she knows what's best for everyone, sweetheart. But don't worry, I'm not going anywhere." As he spoke those words, Jack made a silent promise. Whatever Melissa Richardson was hiding, whatever had really happened to Clara, he would uncover the truth and protect Emma from anyone who tried to separate them again. 2 days after Melissa's hospital visit, she returned with a briefcase full of documents and a court-appointed advocate by her side. Jack watched from the hospital corridor as she marched purposefully toward the administrative offices, clearly prepared for battle. "She's filed a petition to be considered as Emma's temporary guardian," Rachel Martinez informed Jack an hour later, her face grim with concern. "She's claiming prior relationship with the family and alleging that Clara specifically asked her to care for Emma if anything happened." Jack felt his blood pressure rising. That's impossible. Emma was terrified when she saw Melissa in the hallway. Children don't react that way to people they trust. "I agree, but Melissa has documentation, letters supposedly written by Clara, character references, even photos of her visiting Clara's apartment. On paper, it looks legitimate." Jack requested an immediate meeting with Melissa, which she agreed to with suspicious eagerness. They met in a conference room at the hospital, with Rachel present as a neutral observer. "Mr. Harland," Melissa began, her voice syrupy sweet but her eyes calculating, "I understand you've grown attached to Emma during this difficult time. It's admirable, really, how you've stepped up as a good Samaritan." "This isn't about being a good Samaritan," Jack replied carefully. "It's about what's best for Emma," Melissa smiled coldly. "Exactly my point. Emma needs consistency, professional care, and realistic expectations about her future, not the fantasy that some stranger will sweep in and provide a fairy tale ending." "What if that stranger isn't a stranger at all?" Melissa's composure faltered for just a moment. "What are you suggesting?" Jack leaned forward, studying her reaction carefully. "I'm suggesting that Clara's hope of finding Emma's father wasn't a fairy tale. I'm suggesting you know more about Clara's situation than you've admitted." "That's ridiculous. Clara never mentioned a police officer named Jack who worked in the next county. She never told you about meeting someone at a cafe in Millbrook 5.5 years ago?" Jack watched Melissa's face grow pale. "She never showed you his business card or mentioned his unusual eye color." Melissa stood abruptly, her professional mask finally slipping. Even if such a person existed, it would be irrelevant. Clara made poor choices for years. Emma needs someone who can provide stability now, not chase after some romantic notion from the past. "Is that why you told Clara that trying to contact me was a mistake? Is that why you convinced her she was an unfit mother?" "I told her the truth," Melissa snapped, then caught herself and sat back down. "Clara was struggling financially, emotionally unstable, and living in denial about her circumstances. Someone had to be realistic about Emma's needs." Rachel intervened before Jack could respond. "Ms. Richardson, can you explain why you waited until now to come forward? If you've been concerned about Emma's welfare for months, why didn't you contact authorities earlier?" Melissa's jaw tightened. "I was trying to work with Clara privately. I hoped she would come to her senses and accept help voluntarily. When she disappeared with Emma, I began searching immediately." "But you didn't file a missing person report," Jack pointed out. "The police have no record of you reporting Clara or Emma missing." I was hoping they would return on their own." Jack leaned back, pieces of the puzzle starting to fit together. "You knew Clara was planning to bring Emma to me. You knew she was working up the courage to finally reach out. That's why you increased the pressure, isn't it? You were afraid she might actually succeed." Melissa's hands trembled slightly as she gathered her papers. "This conversation is over. I have legal documentation proving my relationship with this family, and I intend to provide Emma with the stable home she deserves." After Melissa left, Jack sat in the conference room trying to make sense of her motivations. Why was she so determined to keep Emma away from him? What was she afraid would be discovered if Clara were found? His phone rang. Mike Torres with an update that sent chills down Jack's spine. "Jack, I found something interesting about your friend Melissa Richardson. She lost her social work license 3 years ago after several families complained about her overly aggressive interventions. Apparently, she had a pattern of convincing mothers they were unfit and then inserting herself as the solution." "How many cases?" "At least 6 that we know of. In 2 instances, the mothers completely disappeared from the system after Melissa's involvement. No forwarding addresses, no contact with family members, no trace." Jack closed his eyes, understanding finally dawning. "Mike, I think Melissa didn't just drive Clara away. I think she's been systematically isolating mothers from their children and positioning herself as their savior." "There's more, Jack. Melissa Richardson isn't just a former social worker. She runs a private consultation service for wealthy families looking to adopt children quickly and quietly. No official agency oversight, no lengthy wait lists." The implications hit Jack like a freight train. Melissa hadn't been trying to help Clara. She'd been trying to separate her from Emma permanently, then position herself to control Emma's future placement. And somewhere out there, Clara Santos was probably hiding, terrified and heartbroken, believing she'd lost her daughter forever to a woman who had convinced her she was a failure as a mother. Emma was discharged from the hospital 3 days later, looking healthier and stronger, but still fragile emotionally. Since Melissa's legal challenge was pending and no other relatives had been located, Rachel arranged temporary placement with the Johnson family, experienced foster parents known for their gentle care of children in crisis. "It's only temporary," Rachel assured Jack as they drove Emma to her new home. "The court will review all the evidence before making any permanent decisions." The Johnsons lived in a warm, welcoming house with a wraparound porch and a swing set in the backyard. Martha Johnson, a retired teacher in her 50s, greeted Emma with the perfect balance of warmth and respect for her space. "We have a room all ready for you, sweetheart," Martha said, kneeling to Emma's eye level. "And if you need anything at all, even just someone to sit with you, you just ask, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly, clutching a small teddy bear that one of the hospital nurses had given her. "Can Jack still visit me here?" "Of course," Martha replied, smiling at Jack. "Mr. Harland is welcome any time." That evening, Jack sat on Emma's temporary bedroom floor while she colored in a new art book. The room was decorated with soft pastels and stuffed animals, clearly designed to make any child feel safe and loved. "Jack," Emma said suddenly, not looking up from her drawing, "the scary lady at the hospital, she wants to take me away from you, doesn't she?" Jack's heart clenched. Despite their efforts to shield her from the adult complications, Emma was perceptive enough to understand the underlying tension. "Some grown-ups think they know what's best for everyone," Jack said carefully. "But I promise you, Emma, I will never stop trying to keep you safe and help you find your mommy." Emma set down her crayon and looked at him with those wise green eyes. "Mommy told me that sometimes people pretend to help, but they're really just trying to control everything. She said the only person she trusted to take care of me was someone with a good heart." "Your mommy sounds very smart." "She is smart, and she's brave too, even when she's scared." Emma picked up a purple crayon and began drawing what looked like a garden. She said that sometimes being brave means doing things that hurt your heart because they're right for someone you love. Jack watched Emma work, understanding that this little girl possessed wisdom far beyond her years, wisdom born from watching her mother struggle and sacrifice. "Emma, when you were living with Mommy, did the scary lady ever come to your house when you were home?" Emma's hand paused mid-stroke. A few times, she would make Mommy cry after she left. Mommy would hold me really tight and say she was sorry, that she was trying her best to be a good mommy. What did the lady say to make Mommy cry? She said Mommy wasn't smart enough to take care of me properly. She said I would be better off with people who had more money and bigger houses. Emma's voice grew smaller. But I didn't want a bigger house, I just wanted to stay with Mommy. Jack felt a surge of protective anger toward Melissa Richardson. This woman had systematically undermined Clara's confidence, convincing a loving mother that she was inadequate while positioning herself as the solution. Emma, I need you to know something very important. Your mommy loves you more than anything in the whole world. Everything she did because she thought it would keep you safe and happy. Emma nodded and reached into her small backpack, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Mommy gave me this before she brought me to your house. She said to give it to the man with kind eyes if I ever felt scared or confused. Jack's hands trembled as he unfolded the paper. It was a letter written in careful handwriting, clearly composed by someone who had thought deeply about every word. To the man who helped me believe in kindness again. If you are reading this, then Emma found her way to you as I hoped. I know you don't remember me well, but one evening you showed me what it meant to be truly listened to and valued. Emma is the most precious gift that came from that time in my life. I never told you about her because I was afraid and ashamed, but I always hoped that someday I would be brave enough to give her the father she deserves. Please love her for both of us. Ja, klar. Jack read the letter twice, his vision blurring with tears. Clara had been carrying this burden alone for 5 years, and when she finally found the courage to reach out, Melissa had made her feel like a failure for even trying. Emma, he said, his voice thick with emotion, your mommy is the bravest person I've ever known, and you're just as brave as she is. Emma smiled, the first truly joyful smile he'd seen from her, and returned to her drawing. This time, she drew 3 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun, with flowers blooming all around them. This is our family when we're all together again, she said confidently. Mommy said that good things take time to grow, just like flowers. As Jack tucked Emma into bed that night, he made a silent vow. He would find Clara Santos, reunite this family, and make sure Melissa Richardson never had the power to hurt them again. Mike Torres called Jack early the next morning with disturbing news. I dug deeper into Melissa Richardson's background. Jack, this woman has been involved in at least 12 cases where mothers mysteriously gave up their children after her intervention. Jack gripped his coffee mug tighter. 12? And here's the kicker. She gets paid substantial fees from wealthy couples looking to adopt quickly. No waiting lists, no extensive background checks. She essentially convinces vulnerable mothers they're unfit, then facilitates private adoptions for huge profits. She was planning to sell Emma. That's what it looks like. And Jack, Mike's voice grew grim. 2 of those mothers filed police reports claiming Melissa threatened them if they tried to reclaim their children. Both reports were mysteriously buried. Jack felt sick. We need to find Clara before Melissa does. There's something else. Melissa's been asking around town about you specifically. Your address, your background, your connection to Emma. Whatever she's planning, you're now a threat to her operation. The legal hearing was scheduled for the following week, and Melissa Richardson seemed increasingly confident about her chances of gaining custody of Emma. She had produced more documentation, including what appeared to be a signed statement from Clara authorizing Melissa to care for Emma in her absence. Jack met with his own attorney, David Chen, to review their options. The problem is, David explained, without a DNA test confirming your paternity and without Clara here to contradict Melissa's claims, we're fighting an uphill battle. Then let's get the DNA test done immediately. Already in process, but results take time. Meanwhile, Melissa's documentation looks official, even if we suspect it's fabricated. That afternoon, Jack visited Emma at the Johnsons' house. She was playing in the backyard with Martha's golden retriever, laughing for the first time since he'd known her. But when she saw him, her expression grew serious. Jack, I remembered something important, Emma said, running to him. The scary lady came to our old house with papers for Mommy to sign. Mommy read them and got really upset. She said the lady was trying to take me away forever. Do you remember what happened next? Mommy called someone on the phone. She was crying and said, I have to find Jack before it's too late. Then we packed our things really fast. Jack's heart raced. Clara had been trying to reach him, probably had found his contact information, but Melissa had forced her to run before she could make contact. Emma, did your mommy have any special papers or documents that she kept hidden? Emma nodded eagerly. She had a box under our bed with important things. She showed me a picture of a nice man and said he was someone very special to both of us. Mike Torres arrived that evening with breakthrough news. Jack, we found Clara's storage unit. She rented it the week before she disappeared and paid 6 months in advance. We need a warrant, but I think that's where she hid everything important before bringing Emma to you. The storage unit contained Clara's most precious possessions, photo albums, Emma's baby pictures, and a shoebox filled with newspaper clippings about Jack's police career. Clara had been researching him for months, gathering courage to make contact. At the bottom of the box was a journal with an entry dated just days before Emma's appearance in Jack's yard. I finally found him. Jack Harlan lives at 412 Maple Street, just like I dreamed. But Melissa found out I was planning to contact him. She says she'll have Emma removed from my care if I don't sign her papers. I have to get Emma to safety first, then find another way. Jack closed the journal, finally understanding Clara's impossible choice. She had sacrificed her own happiness to protect Emma from Melissa's threats, trusting that a man she'd met only once would care for the daughter he never knew existed. Word of Emma's situation spread through the small community of Maplewood, and the response was overwhelming. Margaret Wilson organized a neighborhood support network, while Dr. Collins provided character references for Jack. Even Martha and Bob Johnson offered to testify about Emma's obvious attachment to Jack. This little girl has been through enough upheaval, Martha told Rachel Martinez. Anyone can see how much she lights up when Jack visits. They have a genuine connection that can't be faked. The breakthrough came when Mrs. Henderson from down the street brought Jack an old security camera recording from the morning Emma was found. The footage clearly showed a woman matching Clara's description, carefully placing Emma in Jack's backyard, then standing there for several minutes, crying. She didn't abandon Emma, Jack realized, watching the recording. She was making sure Emma was safe before leaving. Look, she keeps looking toward the house like she's hoping to see someone who might care for her daughter. Mike Torres enhanced the video and discovered something crucial. Melissa's car was visible in the background, parked at the end of the street. She had been watching, making sure Clara followed through with leaving Emma. Melissa orchestrated the whole thing, Jack said grimly. She forced Clara to give up Emma, but Clara outsmarted her by bringing Emma directly to me instead of to whatever adoption arrangement Melissa had planned. The DNA results arrived 2 days before the hearing. Jack was definitively Emma's biological father. Armed with this proof, the security footage, and Clara's journal entries, Jack felt confident they could expose Melissa's scheme. But Melissa had one more card to play. She arrived at the Johnsons' house that evening with a court order for an emergency custody transfer, claiming that new evidence had surfaced about Jack's unsuitability as a guardian. "I'm sorry," the accompanying social worker said apologetically, "but I have to follow the court order. Emma needs to come with us tonight." Emma clung to Jack desperately. "Don't let her take me. Please, Jack. Mommy said you would keep me safe." Jack knelt beside Emma, his heart breaking. "Listen to me, sweetheart. This is just temporary. I promise you, I promise, that I will never stop fighting to bring you home. You're my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." As Melissa led Emma away, the little girl turned back with tears streaming down her face. "Find Mommy, Jack. Tell her I was brave like she taught me." Jack stood in the Johnsons' driveway, watching the car disappear, his hands clenched into fists. Melissa Richardson had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had underestimated a father's love and a detective's determination. The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for the next morning. Jack arrived at the courthouse with his attorney, Mike Torres, and a folder full of evidence that would expose Melissa's true intentions. The courtroom was packed with community supporters, including the Johnsons, Dr. Collins, and many neighbors who had witnessed Jack and Emma's bond. Melissa sat confidently at the plaintiff's table with her legal team, presenting herself as a concerned child welfare advocate. She had somehow obtained a psychological evaluation that questioned Jack's emotional stability and his sudden desire to claim paternity. "Your Honor," Melissa's attorney began, "Ms. Richardson has documented concerns about Mr. Harlan's mental state. He's become obsessively attached to this child, claiming paternity based on minimal evidence and romantic fantasies about a woman he barely knew." Jack's attorney stood immediately. "Your Honor, we have DNA evidence confirming Mr. Harlan's paternity, security footage showing the child's mother deliberately bringing her to his home, and documented evidence of Ms. Richardson's pattern of manipulating vulnerable mothers." The judge reviewed the DNA results, then watched the security camera footage. Jack testified about finding Clara's journal and storage unit, explaining how Clara had been researching him for months before finally finding the courage to reach out. "Ms. Richardson," the judge addressed Melissa directly, "can you explain why you were parked at the end of Maple Street on the morning this child was found?" Melissa's composure cracked slightly. I was concerned about Clara's mental state. I followed her to ensure the child's safety." "Yet you made no attempt to contact authorities when you witnessed what you claim was child abandonment?" I thought it was best to observe the situation first." Mike Torres then presented evidence of Melissa's unlicensed adoption facilitation business and her pattern of separating mothers from their children. The courtroom grew silent as witness after witness testified about Melissa's manipulation tactics. Dr. Collins took the stand to describe Emma's obvious distress when separated from Jack and her repeated requests to go home to Jack. Martha Johnson testified about Emma's daily drawings that always included Jack as part of her family. "This child has found her father," Martha said firmly. "Anyone with eyes can see the love between them. Taking her away from him would be cruel and unnecessary." As the evidence mounted against her, Melissa made a desperate final plea. "Your Honor, even if Mr. Harlan is the biological father, he's a stranger to this child. I've known her for years. I can provide stability and resources that a single man cannot." The judge looked directly at Melissa. "Ms. Richardson, based on the evidence presented, it appears you've been operating an illegal adoption placement service and have manipulated multiple families for financial gain. I'm ordering an immediate investigation into your activities." Then he turned to Jack. "Mr. Harlan, while I'm satisfied of your paternity and your genuine care for this child, I cannot make a permanent custody decision until we locate the child's mother. I'm granting you temporary custody, effective immediately." As the gavel fell, Jack felt tears of relief streaming down his face. Emma was coming home. With Emma safely back in his care, Jack could focus entirely on finding Clara. The investigation had revealed that Melissa's operation was far more extensive than anyone had imagined. She had been separating families across 3 states, always targeting vulnerable single mothers who lacked resources to fight back. Emma settled back into the Johnson household, but now with the understanding that Jack was officially her temporary guardian. Her relief was palpable, and for the first time since he'd known her, she began talking freely about her memories with Clara. "Mommy has a special hiding place," Emma told Jack one evening as they worked on a puzzle together. "She showed me once when we had to leave our apartment quickly. She said important papers should always be kept safe from people who might try to take them away." "Can you remember where this hiding place was?" Emma scrunched her forehead in concentration. "It wasn't at our house. It was at the place where she worked at night, the big building with lots of offices. She had a key to a special room." Jack exchanged glances with Mike Torres, who had come for dinner. "Emma, was this the cleaning job your mommy had?" Emma nodded eagerly. "She cleaned lots of offices after everyone went home. Sometimes I had to come with her when she couldn't find someone to watch me. There was one office that had a loose tile in the ceiling, and Mommy put a box up there." The next morning, Jack and Mike obtained permission to search the Millbrook office complex where Clara had worked nights. The building manager, Mr. Peterson, remembered Clara well. "She was one of our most reliable cleaners," he said, leading them through the hallways. "Very thorough, very quiet. I was sorry when she quit so suddenly a few weeks ago." "Did she say why she was leaving?" "Something about needing to take care of family business. She seemed scared, actually. Kept looking over her shoulder like someone might be watching her." They found the office Emma had described, a small insurance agency on the 3rd floor. Sure enough, there was a loose ceiling tile above the filing cabinet. Jack carefully removed it and found a small metal box containing documents that made his heart race. Inside were copies of Emma's birth certificate listing father unknown, several printed emails between Clara and Melissa dating back months, and a letter addressed to Jack that Clara had apparently never had the chance to send. The emails told a heartbreaking story. Clara had reached out to Melissa for help finding resources as a single mother. Instead of providing assistance, Melissa had gradually convinced Clara that she was failing Emma and that the child would be better off with a more suitable family. The unsent letter to Jack was devastating. Dear Jack, you probably don't remember me, but you changed my life one rainy night 6 years ago. I was Clara, your waitress at Clara's Corner Cafe. You listened to me like I mattered, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly valued by someone. What you don't know is that our conversation gave me the strength to leave an unhealthy relationship I'd been trapped in. A few weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. The baby's father was someone who had hurt me, but the timing meant the child could also be yours. I chose to believe she was yours because it gave me hope. I named her Emma because it means whole or complete, and that's how you made me feel that night. I've been trying to find the courage to contact you for 5 years. I wanted to be sure I was strong enough to be the kind of mother Emma deserved before I reached out. But now someone is trying to take her away from me, and I'm running out of time. If you're reading this, it means I finally found the bravery to tell you the truth. Emma is your daughter, Jack. She has your eyes and your gentle heart. Please love her the way I always knew you would. Kratia. Jack read the letter twice, tears flowing freely. Clara had been carrying this burden alone for 5 years, and when she finally found the courage to reach out, Melissa had made her feel like a failure for even trying. Jack, Mike said quietly, pointing to the last item in the box. Look at this. It was a bus ticket to Portland, Oregon, dated 2 weeks ago, a one-way ticket purchased the day before Emma appeared in Jack's backyard. She went to Portland, Jack realized. She's alive, Mike. Clara is alive, and she's probably wondering every day if Emma is safe. Emma's voice echoed in his memory. Find Mommy, Jack. Tell her I was brave like she taught me. Now he knew where to look. Jack and Mike flew to Portland the next day, following the trail of Clara's bus ticket. The Portland police had been cooperative, and they quickly traced Clara to a women's shelter in the downtown area. When they arrived at the Hope Center, Jack's heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Clara Santos? The shelter coordinator, Ms. Davis, confirmed. Yes, she's been staying here for about 2 weeks. She's been working in our kitchen to earn her keep, but she's been very quiet. Hardly speaks to anyone. Is she here now? She's in the garden out back. I have to warn you, she's been carrying a tremendous amount of guilt about something. We've tried to get her to talk to our counselors, but she just keeps saying she's made an unforgivable mistake. Jack walked through the shelter's back door into a small garden where several women were tending vegetables. He spotted Clara immediately, even though she'd lost weight and her hair was shorter. She was kneeling beside a row of tomato plants, her movements gentle and careful. Clara? He called softly. She looked up, and when she saw his face, she went completely still. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across the garden. Jack, she whispered, as if she couldn't believe he was real. How are you here? Emma found me, he said simply, walking closer. She found her way to me, just like you hoped she would. Clara's face crumpled, and she began sobbing so hard she could barely stand. Is she okay? Is she safe? I didn't know what else to do. That woman was going to take her away permanently, and I couldn't let that happen. Jack knelt beside her in the dirt, taking her trembling hands in his. Clara, Emma is more than okay. She's remarkable, she's brave, and she's been asking me to find you every single day. I'm so sorry, Clara cried. I should have told you about her years ago. I should have been braver. Should have trusted that you might want to know. I was so scared and ashamed. Clara, stop, Jack said firmly but gently. You were protecting her. Everything you did was out of love. I understand that now. Clara looked up at him with eyes full of pain and hope. Does she hate me for leaving her? Jack smiled through his own tears. She draws pictures of our family every day. Pictures of you, her, and me holding hands in a garden with flowers everywhere. She calls it when we're all together again. Clara's sobbing intensified, but now it was mixed with relief. I wanted to call you so many times, but I thought you might not remember me, or that you might not want the responsibility. Clara, Jack interrupted gently, I never forgot you. That night we talked, you changed something in me too. I just didn't know how much until I found Emma in my backyard. He pulled out his phone and showed Clara pictures of Emma at the hospital, Emma with the Johnsons, Emma drawing her family portraits. She's so big, Clara whispered, touching the screen, and she looks happy. She misses her mommy terribly, but she understands that you were trying to keep her safe. Clara wiped her eyes and looked directly at Jack. Jack, I need you to know. Emma is definitely your daughter. The timing, the DNA. I never had any doubt. I just needed to be sure I could be the mother she deserved before I brought her into your life. Jack felt the final piece of his heart click into place. Clara, you are an extraordinary mother, and if you'll let me, I'd like us to be a family, all three of us. Clara's eyes widened. You really want that, even after everything? I've never wanted anything more in my life. 6 months later, Jack stood in his backyard watching Emma and Clara plant seeds in the garden they'd designed together. The legal battles were finally over. Melissa Richardson was facing charges in 3 states, and numerous families were being reunited with children they'd been convinced to surrender. Clara had returned to Maplewood with Jack and Emma, and slowly but surely, she'd begun to heal from years of struggle and self-doubt. She'd enrolled in community college to finish her degree, and Emma was thriving in kindergarten, telling anyone who would listen about her complete family. Daddy, look, Emma called out, holding up a packet of seeds. These are going to be sunflowers as tall as you. Jack smiled at the word Daddy, a title Emma had bestowed on him naturally, without prompting. Clara had been worried that Emma might feel confused about their new family dynamic, but children, it seemed, had an infinite capacity for love. And over here, Clara added, pointing to a corner of the garden, we're planting a special section just for vegetables. Emma wants to grow tomatoes so she can make sauce like her grandma Margaret taught her. Margaret Wilson had indeed become an honorary grandmother to Emma, along with the Johnsons and Dr. Collins. The entire community had embraced their unconventional family story with warmth and support. Jack, Clara said quietly while Emma was distracted by a butterfly. I still can't believe this is real sometimes. After all those years of feeling lost and scared, to have each other, Jack finished, taking her hand. Emma skipped over to them, her hands dirty from planting and her face glowing with happiness. Mommy, Daddy, can we have a picnic in the garden when all the flowers grow? Absolutely, Clara said, kneeling to Emma's level. We can invite everyone who helped us find each other again. Emma considered this seriously. Even the scary lady? Jack and Clara exchanged glances. They'd been honest with Emma about Melissa's role in their separation, explaining it in age-appropriate terms about how some people make mistakes when they try to help. Even her, Clara said gently. Everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching Emma chase fireflies in the twilight, Clara leaned against Jack's shoulder. You know what Emma told me today? Clara said. She said that some seeds have to go through dark, cold ground before they can grow into something beautiful, and that our family was like that. We had to go through the dark part before we could bloom. Jack marveled at his daughter's wisdom. She's pretty amazing, isn't she? She gets that from her father, Clara said, smiling up at him. As the stars began to appear overhead, Emma ran back to the porch, breathless and excited. Mommy! Daddy! I caught a firefly, but I let it go so it could find its family too. She climbed onto the porch swing between her parents, and Jack wrapped his arms around both his girls. Emma, he said, do you remember that first day when you told me about finding the man with kind eyes? Emma nodded. You found me instead of me finding you. Actually, Jack said, looking at Clara, I think we all found each other exactly when we were supposed to. Emma yawned and snuggled closer. Daddy? Yes, sweetheart. Tomorrow, can we plant the seeds that grow into stars? I want to make sure there's always enough light to find each other if we ever get lost again. Jack kissed the top of Emma's head, understanding that they would never be lost again. They had found their way home to each other, and like the garden they were growing together, their family would only get stronger with time. "We'll plant all the stars you want, Emma, all the stars you want."